Everyone, welcome to the Fireside session on disruption of the financial services industry. I'm Anuj Sharma. I'm the Chief Operations Officer working with India Mortgage Guarantee Corporation, having over 16 years experience in risk underwriting, both on secure as well as on the unsecured side. Very passionate about process automation, technology advancements. And that's what we've been trying to do back in India.
Hi everyone, I'm Ning. I'm the CEO and founder of SGP Foods. SGP Foods is a resource efficiency technology company that develops proprietary technology and processes to combat problems in climate change and food security. Just as a fun fact, SGP is the United Nations country code for Singapore. I'm from Singapore.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, so why do we need financial, why there's a disruption required in the financial services industry? Is it because of COVID, or it was supposed to happen without COVID as well? It's just that COVID accelerated the disruption in the industry. So the situation today is either you disrupt or you get disrupted. So let's start a session. In my view, financial services disruption would lead to innovation, in terms of improvement of efficiency, which will be in the market extension and which will help in getting the market share and eventually lead to financial inclusion. So with this financial inclusion, Beck, my fellow speaker, is doing some wonderful work on the financial inclusion side, which will eventually get converted to the customers for all of us, maybe for the loans segment or for the insurance industry. So Beck, thoughts on this financial inclusion?
Thank you very much, Anuj. So actually we are very happy to be participating in this, financial inclusion movement as well. So how it actually links to what my company does. So if you would notice recently for the financial industry, it's being greeted by a green wave and the digital wave. So when we talk about the green wave, I believe it's a topic that is newer to everyone because recently you would have, for example, read more about ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance. And I believe a lot of you might be wondering, so what is it all about and how can I be part of it? Okay, so what this green wave is being spurred by is in fact, consumers and people in general nowadays being more aware about the need to purchase and support green activities and green products. Increasingly, people are also more aware about the effects of climate change, right? We can tell all over the world how various countries, literally the whole world, will be or has been affected by climate change. So because of that, then people would naturally think about what the causes or the sources of climate change is, and we will also ask ourselves, how can we be part of the solution instead? So what has been happening recently, and I believe especially driven by millennials, right, is that they are increasingly demanding for consumer products to be greener and to be more friendly to the environment. So what then happens is that there is increased demand for green products and companies to be able to show that they are embarking on green processes. And it's not as simple as saying or putting on their website that this is a green product, right? Then people will ask, okay, so how green is it? Is it really green, right? So then, because of that, there is a need for companies to be able to substantiate the level of greenness of their products. So that's where there's a need for carbon monitoring, reporting, and verification. So for example, let's say a company produces a particular food product. So what then needs to be done is, for example, from all the way from the farm to the table, right? How the company is able to prove that their processes are greener and friendlier than perhaps its competitors. So that comes to the part about the financial inclusion, because what happens in this green economy is that if you have read in the current affairs or the news recently, there are carbon exchanges that are being launched around the world, and For example, in Singapore, there is a carbon exchange launch called the Climate Impact X. In other parts of the world, even companies are creating their own carbon exchange as well. So what happens in all this carbon exchange is there's the buying and selling of carbon credits that are being involved. So the selling of carbon credits in the exchange, right, there is a demand for carbon credits because of this phenomenon that I talked about just now. So there is a demand for carbon credits. So companies or governments, they will be buying carbon credits from carbon exchanges, for example. Then the question would come, okay, so there are carbon credits available and people are buying it, but how is it being generated and where do carbon credits come from? Right? I think that's the question that a lot of people may have. So the answer to that is, in fact, carbon credits have to be generated. So how is it being generated, right? You will have heard of reforestation projects, for example. So this is one example of how carbon credits are being generated. When people grow trees on land that didn't used to have any trees or that are barren, they actually are able to generate carbon credits in the process of growing trees there. Carbon credits can also be generated through man-made processes. Some companies choose to develop technologies to capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And then for our company, SGP Foods, we are very involved in this carbon ecosystem as well. So we embark on biodiversity-related and natural processes to absorb carbon from the atmosphere. We are also in the business of doing carbon monitoring, reporting, and verification. So the financial inclusion part comes when, for example, when we go to a certain region or a certain country whereby, let's say, there's a lot of land available for agriculture. What we will tell the farmers is, for example, okay, you can choose to grow this particular crop, right? That firstly, of course, is able to secure your livelihood. Right, because by growing crops, there will be food products that can be generated as primary products and as secondary products down the supply chain as well. At the same time, the crops that they grow can sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere at a rate that is much faster than the other crops or the crops that they are growing. So in a sense, they are able to generate more income for themselves and ensure that they have a better quality of life. And this shows that actually everyone, in this economy can participate in any type of financial activities.
So that's a very, very exciting way of financial inclusion, which, as I said, that eventually gets converted into customers for us. Now, Beck, you touched base upon millennials, right? Millennials, why we have been talking since yesterday about the supply side of disruption, there are fintechs coming in, big techs coming in, edtechs coming in, insurance techs coming in. But we are not talking about from the perspective of the demand side of it. There is a customer base called millennials. They are in their prime spending years. That's what contributes. They contribute 60% of the consumer market. So that's the disruption we should talk about. They are bringing in this disruption. They are themselves digital natives. While we are talking about technology, they already know the technology. They are a microwave generation, I would call them, because they want everything quick. And they want to get involved in everything. So that's the disruption, and that's what we should be prepared about. Maybe it's through fintechs or any kind of techs we may introduce, but that's the customer base, and that's what coming in, and that's what we're going to be having a disruption. So, as I said, that either you get disrupt or you disrupt. So taking cue from this, Greg, what do you think? What are the technologies of future? What is going to be there in the next 1 year, say, or in the decade coming in? What do you think on the financial services side?
Yes, so the financial industry is definitely ripe for this disruption, and definitely the right time, right? Because now COVID has just hit. We have seen how the financial services sector has adapted to it. I personally am very happy to see that the financial services industry is adapting very well and doing well in this disruption and in this point in time. So I believe this wave will continue to drive all these changes. Of course, recently with even more disruptions, right, in the world economy. And I do see that for the financial industry, it always helps to be more open-minded towards the latest technologies. So some of the technologies that are being involved definitely include artificial intelligence, blockchain, and even if we go deeper into the details, right, on the software side of things, we talk about databases, right, linking databases together, having a better understanding of consumer profiles, and even being able to help them to make better decisions. So those are the more familiar terms, definitely. And actually, you may be surprised, but the industry can also benefit from Internet of Things, which is IoT. So how does that actually come into play? So the good thing about IoT is that it's able to transmit actual events and happening into electronic data and digital data. So what happens is it's able to help in various processes that require quantification, monitoring, reporting, verification, right? Especially when we talk about physical processes, things that you can observe physically. That's when IoT can really help to track and verify changes, of course, together with blockchain and AI and data analytics. So I think, something new to the industry.
Yeah, thanks. So in my view, I could list out a few of the technologies which will be breakthrough in the next decade. As for me, one is the digital currencies, which our fellow speaker spoke about yesterday. The other is the peer-to-peer lending, which is still gaining traction. The lenders are still not aware about that, while it is still in an unorganized segment, but that's going to take up. The other part is the blockchain. While the whole excitement around the cryptos have died down now, people are realizing the actual worth of blockchain technology. It's still at a nascent stage. The lenders are not. A lot of banks and NBFCs or financial institutions have still not adapted to it. But yes, there's a good amount of traction which will come in the next decade. And the other is I just read an article which was about robo-advisors. Now, the technology is still not there in Asia, but it is being used in a limited manner in Europe, wherein you don't need a wealth advisor. With the application of machine learning technology, you can code the system, and then the system will advise you how to invest and where to invest. So that's what I see coming in the future. And with all these changes, the changes are very fast. The technology is very evolving. The long term has become the short term now. There's no long term, because after 2 years the technology will again change. So it has to be the agility and openness to adapt to the changes and openness to adapt the market. That's what gonna prove the actual treatment to the disruption.
Yeah, really great stuff. Actually, I have a question for Anuj also.
Yeah.
So far, how have you observed that technologies have really helped to improve businesses? Perhaps you can share some observations with us.
But there's a clear-cut efficiency improvement, as I said, efficiency and productivity improvements. For example, we introduced a change back in India. There was this job, or there was this task which at a point of time 100 people used to do. It was right in the entire chain of things. So let's talk about the number of applications processing. So there was one person used to process 100 applications. Now with the introduction of technology and with the IDP process coming in, we are trying to implement IDP, which is intelligent document processing. A part of it has been implemented. So what we have seen the benefit is that one person was able to process 100 applications with this IDP process. That same person is able to process 250 to 300 applications. So that's the amount of efficiency increment, and that's the delta in the efficiency you see. So that's amazing. So you will always find ways to engage your workforce, but at the same time, you need to create a balance of introduction of the technology at the right point, at the right time, so that you can gain out the maximum efficiency benefits out of that.
It's really fantastic. So we are on this topic of how businesses really benefit from new technologies. And in fact, when we talk about businesses that want to quantify their carbon footprint, actually it's not just big businesses, right? Because if you look at the profiles of all the businesses that exist out there, you realize that actually want to partake huge amount of businesses that exist are also small businesses in this right way. And small businesses also they are green, producing carbon credits, and or in fact, show that their consumers that they are a green company. So what we would also like to do, as a company is also to include small companies in this picture, right? Because when we talk about the carbon exchanges that currently exist out there, a lot of them do target the bigger businesses, but we want it to be accessible to any type of business. So this is one of the goals of our company as well.
Yeah, so another point I just want to make here is that while technology is coming in, there are a lot of people doing a lot of many things to improve on systems, to improve the processes, but there is a big mindset challenge which comes in, which needs to change. People are just not able to get out of their legacy systems, like CID systems, or legacies in their mind that a machine can't do a thing which a human can do. But things are changing now. People are approaching alternate data. There's a whole stream working on alternate data basis underwriting. So it's all about how we embrace the change. While the disruption will come, it is more important to understand it and embrace it also. So that's what my point about the disruption, because you have to absorb that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about the so-called the carbon exchange or the buying or selling of carbon credits, actually I think everyone can participate in it. It's not just businesses, it's also consumers, right? Because what's really driving the businesses to embark on all these activities is in fact the consumers. So in a sense, when there's a disruption going on, we think of solutions. Multiple parties can benefit from the solutions that come up from such a situation. Because, for example, if we make it more easier for businesses to quantify their carbon emissions. Let's say this is a small company. That also helps this company to gain more customers, right? Because this business gains the trust of its customers, gains the trust of its consumers, so it's able to generate more revenue. And of course, this is going to be a new type of business, right? Businesses that increasingly look at greener goals. And it's not just this business that will benefit from this situation. It's the other businesses in their industry as well, because the other businesses are going to look at that business and be like, hey, you are doing that, why am I not doing that yet? And they will start to follow. So it's the businesses in their industry and even the wider ecosystem, right? Because businesses, they actually have demand for products as well, because to produce something they need to purchase products. So it's also the other businesses that are involved in the supply chain that would benefit from this green wave as well. So I think there are a lot of parties involved.
So concluding thoughts from my side is that while there is a challenge in implementing these disruptions, which will always be the case when you are going through an extreme economic upgrade, but the change is definitely coming. The landscape is changing, and for all the investors, this segment has a very, very huge appetite for investment. So
you might have observed that there are a lot of green and upcoming jobs that are coming out. So you might have seen on LinkedIn nowadays there are job postings that come up that talk about hiring for ESG officers or ESG compliance officers or ESG account managers. So actually this whole green wave brings a lot of new opportunities to the financial industry and of course beyond the financial industry for sure. When that happens, of course when people are being empowered, when for example their quality of lives are improved, their lifestyle also changes accordingly, right? So they would accordingly be able to purchase more products, to consume more products, in the process of helping themselves to lead happier and more fulfilling lives. And when they do so, then they also do take up more loans, for example. And I think that's how it's a ripple effect, right? Why do people take loans? People take loans to achieve a certain objective, and they could take loans to, let's say, expand their business as well. So it's really an exponential and a starting point for many people.
of it. So let's be ready for the change, let's be ready for the disruption, let's be balanced, and let's embrace technology. Thank you.
We are talking about carbon market. The biggest issue with carbon market is that of integrity. So I would like to hear from you what is your thought and what is that you are doing to make sure that it doesn't harm our net zero ambition rather than towards our goals. So how do you address the carbon market integrity issue?
Yes, so in fact, the carbon market is there to, in fact, help companies and even governments to accelerate towards net zero ambitions. So I do think that, you know, in having such ambitious goals, there needs to be a whole ecosystem of solutions that need to come together with it, you know, to ensure that everything is being integrated. And definitely it's not a simple process, you know, because there are so many different components involved, so many different parts of the picture involved, right? So your question could be how do we integrate?
I'm sorry, it's not about integration, okay. It's about integrity.
Integrity.
Yeah.
Okay. How do we ensure the integrity of carbon markets? Yeah. Okay, that's a great question. Okay, so for example, if we were to look at the United Nations website, especially the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change, they do actually meet up guidelines for people who want to generate carbon credits to follow. You know, in terms of, let's say, this particular business wants to be able to generate carbon credits from growing trees, right? So the UNFCCC website does actually meet out the step-by-step process and guidelines required for this business to be able to produce carbon credits. So the United Nations framework does meet out the most fundamental and basic ones. Of course, companies or even research institutions can choose to develop a more comprehensive set of guidelines to follow, right? So there's an example which is like the life cycle assessment process that you can Google later on. So it's a more advanced form of the quantification process for the generation of carbon credits. So that's the step one of it, because if you realize if UN is to set up the guidelines, it's kind of mathematical, right? Or in the technology side of things, in other words, it's like following an algorithm, right? So that is the step one of things. Even if you have the equations, you have the algorithms, it's not the whole story, because you need to be able to integrate it with software, with technologies, and even with the blockchain. Because if you put information on the blockchain, it's immutable and it's verifiable. So there's that part of the ecosystem. Then you also need people to produce the carbon credits, right? So you need them to be able to link up with such software technologies to show the parties that they want to show that, hey, I'm actually generating it in a way that's compliant to the standard practice, and it's also a high quality carbon credit, and I think for businesses, as much as possible, they would like to generate low cost carbon credits, right? So to do so, they will choose like efficient technologies, efficient processes to embark on.
Just curious to know how ESG and sustainable finance, or the cross section of these, is contributing towards financial inclusion. Any real life examples or practical cases as such?
You hear the question, okay?
Okay, so you'd like to...
Would you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, maybe the last part of it.
Just to rephrase, how ESG and sustainable finance contributes towards financial inclusion. Any real life cases or examples?
For use cases.
Okay, thank you for the question. Yeah, so I can give you an example of that. So like my business, SGP Foods, we are actually developing a franchise model, to uplift the lives of people around the world. So like for example, previously maybe farmers, perhaps they have been growing maybe corn or maybe cotton, so they might ask themselves. I mean, they might be exposed to what we are offering, for example. So we say that, okay, you grow this particular crop, you are able to receive a yield that's way higher than your this crop that you've been growing, and also be able to derive a revenue stream that's higher than before. At the same time, this process also contributes in a good way to the environment, because based on the way you are growing it and the solutions that we provide, we are able to help your process to generate carbon credits. So what it means is, from their process of growing crops on the ground, we are also able to sequester and absorb carbon from the atmosphere. And as you know, carbon causes climate change. So the farmers are also participating in this movement, generating more income for themselves. And I think that's part of an example of financial inclusion taking place.
And yeah, just to give you a perspective from the mortgages side of it, you know, the governments, for example, the Indian government is pushing green housing now, okay, and that's the next step of sustainable financing. So developers are getting sustainable, government is pushing for sustainable financing, green housing, green initiatives, so that you can help the climate as well as you say upon certain carbon footprints as well. I mean, you don't leave the carbon footprints. So that's also the side on which the governments are working in terms of sustainable finance.
All right, thank you.